Welcome, everyone, to the Faith First podcast. So glad you found us here. And my name is Pastor Craig Brown, and we are with First Lutheran Church in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a community of faith where we discover more together. This is episode 95 of the Faith First podcast on February 21st, 2025. On the episode this week, we have another great conversation with one of our church members, Nancy Scheumann, about vocation or her holy calling to her station in life. She has an amazing story of helping kids and families in the most precarious of situations. And she's going to talk about how she was called to bring Christ's light and hope into some very dark situations. I think you'll really enjoy our conversation with Nancy. She really opens up about her life. And also Pastor Steve will be with us, and he's going to drop a bombshell about an encounter with a bully when he was a younger person. It surprised me when he brought it up, so we'll see what you think of it as he talks about today's challenging scripture, another challenging scripture from Jesus. And we'll be praying for you as well. It may be cold outside, but we're going to warm up your heart with a little faith, hope, and love. Thanks for being with us today. It's time to put our faith first. All right, it's time for What's Brewing around First Lutheran Church. Our special guest today is Nancy Scheumann. How are you, Nancy?
I'm fine.
Yeah, it's staying warm?
Trying. Not easy, but trying.
It's a battle.
I really don't go out too much.
Yeah.
I try not
That's
to.
the key, stay inside. So we're having you on today because we are doing a series on vocation called Follow Jesus Everywhere. The idea that when you're a mom or a grandma, you have a calling to that. If you're a grocery clerk or a real estate agent, you have a calling to that. And kind of all the stations of our lives are callings. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your life as we get started here?
Okay, well, I have lived here in Cedar Rapids and been a member here at First Lutheran for about 35 years. And ever since I was in Cedar Rapids, I have worked. My vocation was as a social worker. And I worked at St. Luke's Child Protection Center for about 15 years at two different times. And then I also worked out at the Department of Corrections, where I did a youth development program for Gary Hinsman out there for about 7 years.
Okay. And Gary's a member of our church.
Yep.
Gary and Linda, great people. So what was fulfilling about that work?
What was fulfilling about that work? Well, I just always, I really, even as a young child, felt a call to human service work. And part of the reason that I felt compelled to talk with you guys at the Echo service and on this podcast today is that I was lucky enough to go to a church that gave me the keys when I was a young girl.
Okay, so that's why you're here.
It's part of our whole Growing Young series where we were looking for a church to give us the keys or to allow us the opportunities to grow our faith.
So to give you the keys, the expression is to give you authority, to give you keys to the building that only normally reserved for those people you trust or maybe an older adult. But we're saying the book says to give keys to young people. So who gave you the keys and what keys did they give you?
Well, I had really good pastoral care at this church. And this is a funny story that I'm going to tell the kids tonight a little bit. But when I was 13 years old, I was the only one of all my friends that did not make cheerleading. All my girlfriends made
find that
cheerleading.
hard to believe.
I didn't make the team, and I was devastated because all of them were going to cheerleading and practice in the morning. And I just happened to see in our church bulletin one Sunday an advertisement for working with youth and kids at the Broadway Christian Parish in South Bend, Indiana, which was our sister community church program in South Bend. And so here I am, 13 years old, and you'll have to remember this is during the Civil Rights movement. And this was a very, very diverse church, and there had even been some rioting in that area at the time, and I'm 13 years old. So my pastor said, they didn't have all the rules that they do now about being 18 or whatever when you do some of this kind of thing.
Yeah, two parents.
So my pastor knew that I was sad and just said, Nancy, you can answer this call to go to Broadway Christian Parish and work with these young people there.
Okay.
And so I got my mom, who was kind of a timid little lady, to drive me over to this church in the middle of a very, very diverse, just kind of an area of South Bend that had all these rioting in the last couple of months.
Right.
So at any rate, I went over there. They actually let me go out into the neighborhoods, just knock on doors, and bring kids to this Bible school program that they were having at the church. So here I am, 13 years old, walking around this neighborhood, but I just had a passion for it ever since that time. So I say that my church gave me the keys. They allowed me that opportunity. They talked to me about it. They also did, I just had such a great experience of pastors taking us to different places. For example, we went to a synagogue one Saturday. We went to a mosque and worshiped with the people there. I was introduced to the Baha'i faith. We did all of these really neat trips and learned a lot about different religions and that sort of thing.
So you were exposed to a lot as a young person.
I really was, yeah.
Were you successful in the door knocking? Did people come?
Yeah. And at that time, this was probably in about 1967. So I would knock on these doors, and a mom would answer the door, and she'd call 3 or 4 kids, and she'd go, "You need to go to church and go to Bible school." And she'd just let them walk away with me, and I took them back to this church. So it was different times,
different era,
for sure. Yeah. But
and you really believe in, you and your husband Mark really believe in the idea of growing young, everything that Michael Beckman has been talking about for the last, you've been a huge champion of his and that effort. What drives you to be such a champion for our youth, Nancy?
It's just those experiences I had with my own church, and just that we're both very passionate and faith-filled about keeping young people in the church and wanting to go to church no matter what that looks like in the future, and have a relationship with God, basically. We don't want these nuns. We want people back into our church families.
Right.
We just feel passionate about it.
Not nuns, N-U-N, but nuns,
Right.
N-O-N-E. Those people that when you put out a religious survey, they say, what religious affiliation are you? None is now the number one response among young people by far.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking 60, 70, sometimes 80% in young people unchurched. And not that they're against God, they just don't see the relevancy of it. And that's an uphill challenge for the Christian church. That's kind of what we're facing today.
And I'm sad about that. And we really would like to do all that we can to help our church keep young families involved. We think it's very important.
Well, they tell us the research says things that we're doing right here, right now, this is a big thing.
Yeah.
That young people want to know that our faith is authentic. They want to know where it comes from. So I'm going to ask you, can you tell us a little about your faith journey and how you got to where you are? Maybe, and include your work life, how you got called to that. Okay.
Well, it was I was just a church kid through and through and went to youth group. But really, I just have always had a close relationship with God in my heart. I mean, I believe in my heart I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and I believe that we have a place here, that God knits us together in his womb and starts our soul, and then we have a place here on earth to be of service to others. And I learned that through having a very, very strong church family and faith, and they just placed that in me, and I knew my community, and I can honestly say that my faith grew from there because of those people in my life. So I always wanted to be in this human service field because I started when I was 13. So I went to school for that, and I was involved. I didn't quite know what I wanted to go into. I did a lot of community work. I tried working in the area of mental illness a little bit. I really like youth development work, but I've just felt called to be part of that work. When we moved to Cedar Rapids, though, once again, the church played a huge role in everything because I answered an ad, and Susan Tesdall, who is a member here, was the person interviewing for the role at the Child Protection Center, and we just clicked, partly because I was a new member at First Lutheran, and she wanted to get to know me, and then later I served on consul with Gary Hinsman, who hired me to go to the Department of Corrections.
I didn't know all those connections through the church.
Yes, and they were all through First Lutheran Church.
Talk about community.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So that's very important to me.
So you were a member here as was Sue, who's your eventual boss.
And mentor,
And
yes.
mentor. And then so you went and interviewed for the job, got the job. I can't imagine, Nancy, the challenges that you must have faced with young people in such desperate circumstances. How do you steel yourself up for that? Where, I mean, some of those had to really just crush your heart when you went home. Those stories still stay with you? Is there any that...
Oh, yeah. I mean, what I tell people when they ask me about how hard and difficult the work was, the good thing about it was that we were getting children after this abuse has occurred, and we were getting them to the next stage of help. Mm-hmm. But you're working for a hospital in the community, so how do you share your faith in that situation? Because believe me, I had lots of people say, where was God during this abuse?
Oh, yeah.
My child's life is ruined. Where is God? I've lost my faith. And so I had to, and I couldn't really directly say, I want you to go over to First Lutheran and talk to Pastor Craig. I wasn't allowed to do that. So I just told them, I would say, God is right there. He's here with you now. Your child's life is not ruined. This was an awful thing to happen to your child. And I acknowledge that. And I said, but you're in such a good place now to start tomorrow as a new day in the life of that child. And we're going to get them some help, and we're going to help you as a family and that child get through this.
Well, what I feel in that statement is God's accompaniment is with us. That
at all times.
That Christ comes to cement that, I think, with his life, with his death, with his resurrection. And I really get a sense that you believe that. And,
yes.
And that you live that, and that you said, I'm feeling comforted from you, and I didn't go through that. So I think that's just a great way to share the faith with those people. And some of those, can you kind of describe the variety of abuse? Was it sexual abuse,
it was sexual
emotional,
abuse,
physical?
We worked in conjunction with the Department of Human Service and law enforcement. So
Okay.
all of our cases were referrals from one of those two agencies. And then we did a forensic interview with the child. My role was as a family advocate to work with the parents while their child was being interviewed and helping them just cope with what was going on.
Yeah.
And then help them find services after they left the center that day. So by the end of it, we were dealing with a lot of human trafficking cases. 90% of our cases were child sexual abuse because that was what needed a police referral,
right,
and that sort of thing. So
wow, what an absolute need, a place of absolute need for Christ.
It was.
And I imagine you really felt God using you through day to day.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So from there, retirement. And then now how do you feel called?
Well, I feel called right now, and it's not into the community as much as it used to be. I start every day with a quiet time, and I say to God, just put people in my path that I can serve for you today. And right now, God is leading me toward my friends, toward people here at the church, that maybe some elderly people, older than me even, and just my immediate group of friends. I've started a book study with some of my friends, and just being there for people. We're starting to get to an age where we may be going through some things. So I just am feeling called in that way to just be there for my close friends and, of course, my kids and grandkids. So.
And I would say the youth of our church. You very much feel that way. Nancy, I can't thank you enough for just being the person that you are. You and Mark are just amazing people. I'm getting choked up already.
Oh, well, thank you.
Just thinking about it. And I just appreciate you so much. And not only that, your heart for others, but think of all those families that you touched, and brought some hope and light to in such a desperate situation. So thank you for that. Thank you for caring about our young people, all people in the church, and just carry on.
Thank you. I will.
Good. Thanks for being with us today, Nancy.
You're welcome.
And that's a look at what's brewing around First Lutheran Church.
Away we go.
All right. Away we go. It's time for Digging into the Word. We have Pastor Steve with us this week. Excited to get back in the pulpit?
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. Yes, looking forward to that very much. And,
before you begin, I got to ask your reaction to the annual meeting last week. That was a barrel of monkeys, wasn't it?
We had a good time and good conversation, a good turnout. A lot of people showed up.
I guess over 100, which is a lot for an annual meeting for any church.
Yeah. No, it was... there were enough people thinking, okay, what do I not know? I mean, it's sort of like typically when a lot of people show up, something's brewing. But no, they were just interested in Growing Young report and interested in talking about the building, where we're at that way. Had a chance for people to respond to 2 questions, kind of wondering, whether this is included, or ask the question of, what do you want to be sure that the building committee, keeps track of is at this time. And, had good responses. And I think the building committee has been thinking about all of that. They're going to form some answers to the kind of the cluster of questions they had and so forth. But everything was, it was a good meeting, positive spirit, and you could say a good time had by all, or decent enough.
I thought the pictures or the new renderings of what the narthex or entry space could look like was really neat. And all the 20 or the under 20-year-olds that were at my table, they said they really liked it too.
Yeah.
That was appealing to them. And so, well, maybe we're hitting something here if the younger people in our congregation like what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about the spaces that we have, it is about spaces for people today and into the future. So we're kind of leaning forward rather than leaning back.
Yep.
But we want them to serve the ministries that we have. They will. Mm-hmm. It'll be fine.
It's funny you said, what do I not know? It's like, are they preparing an ambush for me?
That can happen.
That can.
Never has.
Never has at our place yet, but you never know. Well, so what do you have for us this week for the
Well, the lesson today is we continue in sort of the easy teachings of Jesus. And today, Jesus talks about loving your enemies and loving those who curse you.
Easy topic.
Yeah, right. In particular, he says, if you do good to those who do good to you, well, what credit is that? I mean, even sinners do the same. Or if you lend to those who you hope to receive interest back, I mean, what credit is that to you? But rather love your enemies, do good, lend, expecting nothing in return. And then your reward will be great. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. So Jesus really kind of sets the stage for, and actually the early church in the time of Jesus and in the first couple of 100 years was seen as distinctive because in Roman culture, mercy was only something that you showed to your own family. You never showed mercy to some outside of your clan, your family, or your clients. And the church was known as a community of people who was merciful not only to their own members, but to those in the community at large, that they shown kindness. And there was a generosity of spirit that was unlike anything else in Roman and Greek culture at that time. There were, in the 200s and 300s, there were a couple of plagues or epidemics that swept through. Probably soldiers that had gone to Germany and brought back smallpox or the measles, and there were no defense systems, and so that a third of a town could die from these pandemics. Well, in Roman culture, you only took care of your own, and if somebody was sick but they weren't part of your family or your sphere of connections, well, tough luck. Well, what happens if your family is the one that's decimated and there aren't many left and nobody's going to come and help you because that's not what they did? And the only organization, the only group of people that would offer any mercy, any kindness was the church. Mm-hmm. And so people would find their way to the church because it was the community of last resort for showing kindness into the world.
Martin Luther always called the church the hospital for the soul, but this sounds like it was a literal hospital that they were creating.
Yeah, I mean, the church was known both for preaching the gospel, but also showing acts of mercy that were very physical. Matthew 25, to clothe those who are naked, to feed the hungry, give water, visit, and have concern for the sick. So the church didn't see those as sort of pretty sayings, but saw them as defining for what it meant to be the church.
Do you think that's where the hospitals came from, that were grounded in Christian foundings?
Oh, yes.
Methodist hospital?
Yes.
Catholic hospitals?
I mean, monasteries were often known as centers for hospital work or, so forth in the communities, particularly in Europe after the collapse of the Roman Empire. And that carried through even into the 19th, 20th century, where medical facilities in America were first primarily church-sponsored. Mm-hmm. So it was Lutheran General. It was Unity Point, St. Luke's Methodist Hospital.
Yeah.
So that was very much the case. I think the culture itself and the complexity of medicine have removed that from church affiliations, and they're now pretty much self-standing and don't have much to do with churches anymore other than some Catholic institutions. So Jesus is talking about a different way to live. One of the opening questions I had, when you were a kid growing up, who was the hardest person for you to get along with?
Okay.
And what was it about them, or what was it about you? And I think I'm going to tell this story on Sunday about a kid who just teased me mercilessly, and it was at church. And finally I couldn't take it anymore, and I took action in an unkind way. But you'll have to come and find out.
I was going to say, what did you do?
It was not epic, but it was vigorous and embarrassing at the same time. On a Wednesday in Lent, no less.
Oh my gosh, that makes me think of, I had a girl who would physically hit me all the time.
Yeah.
And we're at grade school. I'm like, why is this girl hitting me? And I found out later she liked me.
Oh.
And so that's what you do when you like somebody. Yeah. You hit them, apparently.
No, I did nothing of what Jesus talked about.
Oh, okay.
Actually, when you put them in a string, we ask the question, what is, these actions, what's more challenging? To love your enemies, to do good to those who hate you, to bless those who curse you, to pray for those who abuse you, to give your cloak, to turn the other cheek. And then we have to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, probably easier. It's to be merciful, do not judge. We seem to live in a judgy time. Do not condemn, forgive, give a measure of kindness to another. We know, if you were to say, should that be what the church is about or not, we would say, yeah, the church should be about that.
It's almost a no-brainer.
But when you think about your own personal life, it may be stretched a little bit more.
In there is the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do to you. I did a devotion I serve as our kids' scout chaplain for Boy Scouts. And I did a lesson with them on the golden rule and showed where it's in all the major world religions. Basically almost the same thing word for word. But interestingly enough, all the world religions, it's set in a negative context.
Right.
Do not do to others as you would not have them do to you. And
kind
Jesus
of a minimal rule, and this is maximal.
Yeah, Jesus is the only one that has, there might have been one other that was positive. Mm-hmm. Do unto others as you
there's
have
no
them
limit
do.
to that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about what Jesus is talking about here is that when you think about the church and what we do, there is an understanding that has developed in the late 20th century that the church should attract people. That the nature of evangelism is attractional, that we attract people to the church. We attract them to be baptized, attract them to attend. The things that we do, the ministries that we care for, are meant to attract and draw people in. And yet when you look at what Jesus is talking about, it's more about how we embody the values of Jesus without necessarily expecting a return, not getting something for it. You just put yourself out there in a certain way. So, doing good is not so you might have good in return. It's just simply who you are. I think the Christian church in the 21st century, people have they've got a good smell detector, and they can tell when any organization, if you're just being nice to me because you want something from me.
Good salesman.
Right.
Makes
As opposed to saying, just simply who are we and who is Jesus through us? And we do what we do not because we're going to get something out of it or get someone out of it. We just do what we do because that's who we are and who Jesus is for us and through us.
No ulterior motives.
Yeah. There was a question here, too, about, the Amish and the Mennonites and others take these words of Jesus as a guide for a pacifist way of life in all areas. Mm-hmm. And there have been some well-reported stories of Amish communities forgiving those who have done great harm, who have come in and who have killed or done great damage. And how do you find yourself responding? Often when I've heard those stories, and they've been in the news, people are just sort of amazed at that witness. And they do it simply because that's what Jesus asked them to do.
Like someone comes in and commits a murder?
Yeah, there have been terrible things like that within sort of acts of terrorism, actually, within Amish communities. They've actually gone to the prison to forgive them.
Wow.
So they're not going to define who they are.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. There's the other side of this, and I've asked the question, do you have a personal story of reconciliation or breaking the cycle of anger that relates to these words of Jesus, to forgive, to love the enemy, to do good to those who do you harm. And my comment is that I think actually within the Christian community and within Christian families, this happens more than we realize. It's just part of what you do. And you know why that is? Because we've been to funerals where there's been a breakdown. Mm-hmm. We've been to funerals where there has not been forgiveness, where the cheek has not been turned, where there has not been an effort at reconciliation or of going the extra mile. A hard line is drawn and a chip is on our shoulder, and family members simply break apart. They don't talk to one another. They can hardly be together. It does not go well.
You're talking about a two siblings, a son and a daughter of the deceased person, and they just will not talk to each other.
Yeah,
but they almost have to when they're doing funeral planning. So they're sitting in a room with us, and they can't hardly stand each other.
Or could have been conflict with the parent, and you say something about this person, and not much can be said.
Yeah.
When
I'll take a pass.
When few words are said, much probably is left untold.
Yeah.
My point in that is it simply shows the power of reconciliation and of breaking the cycle of anger that often that has to happen in families. You can't go through a whole lifetime with, nothing ever happened. There's always has to be the occasion where carrying out these things that Jesus talks about has to happen. Because if it doesn't, we don't function together very well. And families in particular become, as we say, dysfunctional.
That's true for any relationship or organization, right?
Yeah.
It's true for a church.
I think that the community of Jesus in the Christian church, even though it may be hard for us, we are always being schooled in this ministry of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. And though it may be hard for us, we're always at some point, what does it mean to turn the other cheek? Or what does it mean to love even those whom I find challenging? What does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to show an act of mercy where I'd rather show an act of irritation? And we're shaped by that. Is anyone perfect? No. But I think we're shaped by that. And why? Well, because we recognize on some fundamental level, that's who Jesus is. When I am joined to Jesus in baptism, that's something of who I am. And I keep bumping against that standard, that vision, that picture of what it means to be a human being that Jesus gives to me, both last week and this week. If you can listen to these words and not be troubled, you're not listening.
Yeah.
They should be troubling words. They should be hard words. But that doesn't mean that they can't also be life-giving words. They can't be important words that we need to hear and important words that we need to take to heart. And when I think about, the message for this week, ultimately, you think about, as you pointed out last week, all of these things Jesus did for us. Jesus enacted them in his own life, especially, in the last week of his life. That is who Jesus is for us. And Jesus now invites us into that life for one another. Mm-hmm. So we do not begin with sort of a standard of what are the goodie points I need to get to heaven. You already got it. He's already died for you. God's grace has been given to you. Now, what is that going to look like in your life and in mine? And Jesus provides a picture of that.
Is there any way to tie it into vocation?
So vocation is not singular. Vocation is we have the calling of being a parent, calling being a child, calling to be a neighbor. We have our vocation in the job that we have. We have a calling as a citizen. We have many callings. We have many relationships. As a person baptized into Christ, both last week and this week, serve as sort of that framework of values of who Jesus is for me that he calls me then to be to others. So it is about how to walk through the world, how to walk through my life.
My call as a baptized Christian.
Yes. Okay. We'll see where we go.
Okay. Well, find out what sins Pastor Steve committed against that young child. Probably still traumatized. Next week we'll talk about it, then we'll find out and we'll talk about forgiveness. You'll tune in next week.
Okay, there we go.
Thanks for being with us, Pastor Steve.
Thank you.
It's time now to pray our way through the week. And with the Spirit of Christ shining upon us, let us boldly pray for the church, the world, and all of God's creation. Surprising God, you call us to love our enemies and show kindness in the face of cruelty. Let our actions be a shining witness of your overwhelming grace for all, as we follow Jesus everywhere. As animals hibernate and fields lay dormant, they remind us that life and faith are not static, but always changing and growing. May we, with all creation, trust that the ending of one thing can promise new life in a new way. We pray for our leaders and policymakers who work to reduce violence in our nation, cities, and towns. Give your wisdom and discernment amid heated arguments and differing viewpoints. We also pray for victims of abuse and violence. We ask for you to provide safe shelter and new beginnings to those experiencing domestic violence in dangerous situations. Enfold with love all who seek your healing care, especially our family and friends in the hospital and all those in need of healing. Empower all of our faith communities to be signs of your gracious love. Bless the local ministries of parish nursing and caregiving, that they would be a voice for those in need in our communities. O God, in whom we trust, be with our podcast listener this week. Where there are challenges, give them strength. Where there is sorrow, give them comfort. Where there is brokenness, give them healing. Where there is doubt, give them faith. Where there is darkness, give them your light and your hope of your Son, Jesus Christ. We entrust our prayers to you, O God, in the sure and certain hope that your promise is revealed among the people. Amen. I want to thank you for tuning in to be with us today. Special thanks to Pastor Steve for stopping by and opening up the scriptures for us a little bit. Nancy Scheumann and all of our lay people in our church that have come so far. We got one more on the docket for you. Next week, Miss Donna Sprague is going to be sharing her story. She's got a wonderful heart. Great person. You're going to want to tune in next week. And you got to tune in to find out what Steve did. We're just coming to worship, I guess, and you can find out as well. What a cliffhanger. I'm so proud of him. That's what we in the news business call a tease. So you have to take a step to find out more. Way to go, Pastor Steve. Also coming up on the horizon is Ash Wednesday, a wonderful, meaningful celebration in the church where we think about our own mortality and we start the journey to Lent and the cross. Ash Wednesday, very important to Lutherans and Christians worldwide. We always have very good attendance and very meaningful services. So March 5th is Ash Wednesday. It's coming up quick. We're having 2 services at noon and 6:30. We will be streaming the 6:30 service. So if you want to tune in from wherever you are, you can worship with us at 6:30 or after that on YouTube. We're also doing Ashes to Go. So if you want to stop by the church, about 4:30 to 6:15, 6:30 after work, I'll be outside doing Ashes to Go on people in your cars on your way home from work or wherever. If you want to stop in and do that, or you can come in and do the full meal deal and worship with us at noon or 6:30 inside. So glad you're with us here today. Stay warm out there. It's getting march towards spring. It's coming, and we appreciate you being with us today. We'll talk with you more next week. Until then, be courageous. God is with you as you put your faith first.